favorite things about instilling habits in your children is that really habits, and this is a Charlotte Mason quote as well, but that is that habits, when they are in the hand of a mother, is as the wheel is to the potter. Like, you are really able to form your children by creating these habits, and you're not only forming them to bless your home and their current family that they're living in, but really when you are forming these good habits in your little people when they are little, you are blessing their spouse, you are blessing their future families. Guys, and welcome back to another video, or welcome if this is your first time here. My name is Dana. I'm a mama to four, and in today's video, if you couldn't already tell by the title, I'm going to be doing a mini series talking about kind of how we parent, but also kind of how we form habits in our little people. I think forming habits is such a powerful but underrated thing that you can do with your children when it comes to creating that peaceful environment, when it comes to building character. Just all the little things that in some way are because of habits, whether that be a good habit or a bad habit. You know, everything we do, even as adults, is because of a habit. Like, we brush our teeth every night, that's a habit. We brush our teeth in the morning, that's a habit. Do we put our shoes away when we come in? That might not be a habit yet. Do we hang our coat up when we come in? That might not be a habit yet. So no matter what we do in life, it's because of a habit. And so being able to look at it from a different perspective of when we are training our little people to form different habits, again, we're not just training them to bless our home and our current home in which they live, but they are also being trained to do these things so they can be a huge blessing to their spouse, to their future families, to their children's children, and what a powerful impact that has just because you are teaching them new habits. So we're going to get into that today and kind of talk about a few of the things that we are currently working on in our home, how we do it. This is, like I said, going to be a series. Today is just going to be a little bit of a light rundown on overall what habits are and why we're choosing to kind of form them in our little people, and then the one habit that we are currently working on now. Because one of the things I have also learned when it comes to habit training is you cannot do more than one habit at a time. It doesn't work, because I think a huge part of that thing too, why it doesn't work, is you don't want to be like a nagging parent. You never want to be like, okay, this is a bad habit, this is a bad habit. That doesn't work that way, and I never ever want to become across that way. But if we can choose like one habit, so a new habit, going into the new habits that we are trying to form, that is, at the end of the day, you take your dirty clothes and let's put them right in the laundry basket. Like, say that's being a habit that's being created, and again, that's a blessing to your spouse and anyone else in your life. But so after the end of the day, you take your dirty laundry, you just throw it in the laundry basket. And it took about, I want to say probably 5-6 weeks before we no longer had to like, hey, did you first get something, baby? Like, let's put the laundry in here, before it's now just second nature. It does take a long time. And one thing that I wanted to kind of be encouraging about and talk to you about too is like, when you are teaching a new habit, it doesn't matter what it is. It takes a long time, mamas. It takes a good 6 to 8 weeks for a new habit to form. But once it does, the amount of peace that provides just your family and your home is incredible. It's worth it, I promise you. If you can practice self-discipline and practice awareness when it comes to these habits. And again, I mentioned before, as far as like self-discipline, that being the hardest part when it comes to forming a habit, the hardest part is being aware. Like, as a parent, it's being consciously aware that this is a habit that you are working on. You cannot lapse in this habit because you are trying to make it become a habit. And so the hardest part as a parent is to not forget it yourself and to self-discipline yourself. You almost have to you have to like train yourself to think about these things. Because for me, when it came to training my children to put their dirty clothes in the laundry basket every night, I had to remind myself to remind them, but it was not in a like, oh, you forgot to do something. It was like, oh, I need to remind myself to like make sure that I'm aware of whether or not they're doing it. So if they do it, I am also being aware of that, congratulating them, be like, you did it without being reminded, great job. Like, you know, really rewarding them. But that also requires, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing, whether or not the habit was missed or done correctly, it requires me to also be aware of whether or not they're doing it. So really, self-discipline and the parents during habit training is one of the hardest things, I'm going to be honest, for like reminding yourself to remind them. And one of the things I have also found to be extremely beneficial when it comes to overall habit training, and that is, like I mentioned before, you don't want like to be like the nagging parent that tells them like what to do constantly every second, but to really just hone in on that one habit you're working on. As I mentioned, for us, it's the laundry thing. And then for the first week, I will tell them every night, like, hey, go ahead and put your laundry in the laundry basket. And they're like, okay. And they'll go do it. And then I'll be like, good job, thank you. And the second week, I'll maybe only have to mention it a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 nights out of the 7 nights. Then they'll be like, okay. For the third week, I'll be like, hey, did you forget something? And they'll be like, oh, yeah. And so they're what you don't want to do, and something that I made the mistake of doing with the first few habits we were trying to teach them. And that is verbally reminding them, like, hey, you need to do this, or hey, you need to do that. Because a lot of the times, if you verbally remind them, then they are going to subconsciously rely on you to tell them what to do, and that's not really how a habit is formed, or how a true habit can be formed. You kind of have to like step back and be like, okay, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Like it's you have to retrain your brain pattern almost as well. And so learning that I can't always like be their voice as well. I want them to think like, oh, by themselves, oh, that's right, I was supposed to do this. And then by the 4th or 5th week, really only once a week am I having to be like, hey, and they're like, oh, yeah. And so they're able to do it. And then by week 6 and 7 and then going into 8, it was just like they did their thing every night. That was like, now it's part of their regular routine. Like when they get ready for bed, they brush their teeth, they throw their stuff in their laundry. And it's not even something that they even think about now, because it's something that they just do. And the blessing that creates for me and in the overall home of just like not having laundry to pick up anymore. And that's something that's so simple that it took diligence and self-discipline on my behalf to really be intentional about congratulating them when they did it correctly, or working with them when, you know, they forgot, and like also giving them grace when needed as well. And so really honing in on that, and then realizing that this habit is now formed. You can now, well, move on to the next habit first of all, but you can now, that's one less thing that you have to do almost. And it again sets them up to just be just better adults, I think, honestly, as well. And again, this whole picture, and my husband and I talk about this a lot when it comes to not just habits, but I think everything in general in life when it comes to child raising, is you really are blessing the future generation by how you raise your children. And it is our choice how that next generation looks by how we raise our children almost. And that's such a powerful thing to realize, is like your grandchildren are going to be affected in every way by how you raise your children. And it's just it's a very eye-opening thing when you look at the big picture, when you're thinking about, you know, how it's going to affect future generations. And when you're creating these good habits of cleanliness and orderliness, kindness and honesty and integrity, and all these beautiful things that we can use to honor and glorify God, and we're creating that in our home again to bless those future generations, I think it is 100% worth it. And while it is also challenging as the parent, because I said the hardest part is disciplining ourselves. Another one of my favorite quotes from Laying Down the Rails, and again, you're probably very familiar with this quote. It's another Charlotte Mason quote. But that is, the mother who takes pains to endow her children with good habits secures for herself smooth and easy days. And that is so true, because they are just like little sponges and they soak up everything. And I think it's something so beautiful and valuable when it comes to shaping your little people and forming these good character building habits. And that is so true though, because if we go through, even though it's very hard work, I'm going to be honest, it's hard work for the parent to be very intentional and again aware, but you really are securing for yourself the smooth and easy days ahead by working on those good habits now. And it's been such a huge blessing. I'm going to mention one more thing when it comes to forming habits. My next video will be actually how we cultivate them in our home and some other current habits that we are actually working on. But another thing I wanted to mention, and I already mentioned this lightly in the beginning of the video, and that is the number one most important thing to realize and to not forget, and this is something that I'm speaking to myself right now, and that is that children can pick up actions, attitudes, temperaments. They can pick up anything from around the home, outside of the home, anywhere. As I mentioned before, they're little sponges and they can soak in everything. So if my attitude is not where it should be, they will soak that up. If my attitude towards something that they're doing is wrong, they will soak that up. So every little bad habit and bad attitude or something that I as a parent have, they will pick that up. So again, it goes back, and I've said this multiple times before, so sorry if it's repetitive, it goes back to our self-discipline and disciplining ourselves, because at the end of the day, like, we really do need to become what we want our children to become, and we can't try to form new habits in them if we ourselves are not doing these things as well. So also, if you're wanting to start this kind of new forming habit journey with us and kind of walk along this book with us, it's something that, like, I'm very excited about kind of sharing with you guys as far as like what we do in our home to form these habits, but it's also a challenge. And I also wanted to be transparent with you as well, that as soon as you start wanting to form these new habits, but also realize it's going to be challenging, but when you get to the other side, it is amazing. It's beautiful. It really is. Like I've mentioned before, like when the new habits begin, it's just amazing. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. The next one, I'm going to be obviously talking about kind of cultivating them, a few of the things that we do to cultivate them and things like that. But until my next video, I hope you guys have a great day, whatever you're doing, and God bless. Bye.